The history of Johannesburg is the history of the rand mining industry. With the expansion of the mines, the town became a city, a mining metropolis. To South Africa and the world, Johannesburg is the city of gold.
Johannesburg, known as Igoli, the place of gold. Once the lifeblood of South Africa's financial sector, the heartbeat of its society, and a city of promises and dreams and all that glittered. But no longer. Johannesburg became Africa's richest city thanks to the discovery of gold in the late 1800s and the subsequent gold rush that continued into the 20th century. As mining operations were set up, so too developed a bustling city, initially filled with tented mine workers' accommodation, but later replaced with bricks and mortar. Through the 1900s, buildings mushroomed in the area, and as the gold flowed, the buildings grew taller and grander. Johannesburg became the economic hub of South Africa and was, for a time, also the most prosperous city on the continent.
It will be almost impossible to talk about the decay of the city without connecting it to its source of origin, which is how gold mining evolved over time in the history of this country. If you look at the buildings that we have in the city of Joburg, most of them were a product of the good days of gold, the gold boom, when gold was doing very well over a particular period of time. It gave us what you see as real estate in the CBD, residential flats, office parks, or buildings that are used as corporate offices. Many of them are here. And of course, even retail. That history evolved into also producing the tertiary sector, particularly the banking and financial services sector. So both the primary, the secondary, the tertiary sectors of the economy came out of that history.
Joburg was only founded in the 1880s, but like every other international city, it will experience peaks and troughs. That's a cycle that happens in New York, London, Amsterdam, Paris, anywhere around the world. Johannesburg, when it went through its trough in the 70s, 80s, 90s, it was exacerbated by political change, by socio-economic change, and a lot of what has happened to get Johannesburg to where it is actually not very recent. It's taken place over quite a long time, and it's been a very difficult upward trajectory to get out of that trough.
In the 1980s, much of the world experienced an economic recession. It is widely considered to have been the most severe recession since World War II. Then, from 2007 to 2008, the financial crisis hit, more devastating than the 1980s recession.
There were a number of factors that happened in the 80s realistically, when South Africa started normalizing and streets started changing, even in terms of demographic makeup. Much of corporate South Africa actually fled the Joburg inner city, fled to and created Rosebank and Sandton. And much of Sandton was created in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. Many of the corporates that left, they left quickly, and they left many vacant buildings behind. And if you think about it, it creates a vacuum. What does a vacuum draw in? It draws in the homeless, the unemployed, a criminal element, drugs, crime. So what happened was that there was a flight from the inner city to the suburbs. A vacuum was created, negative elements came into the inner city, and everyone who went to the suburbs said, look, we told you so. That's why we left the inner city. But the reality is that they actually created the problem by fleeing without a plan and by creating a vacuum in the first place.
There's Mr. Mandela, Mr. Nelson Mandela, a free man taking his first steps into a new South Africa.
With the abolishment of the apartheid system in the 1990s came new governance, a new dawn, the Rainbow Nation. Under the leadership of President Nelson Mandela, Johannesburg and South Africa heaved with excitement and hopes for a prosperous future for all.
So help me God.
And for some time, Johannesburg seemed to come alive again. But as the city experienced a string of leadership changes, the grip on governance and service delivery began to slip.
On April 27, 1994, Nelson Mandela cast his vote in the first free and democratic elections in South Africa, marking the official end to racial oppression and apartheid rule.
Never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another.
I've been living here for more than almost 30 years now. Yeah, I've been almost 30 years living around Joburg. Things have moved from bad to worse. It's worse now. It used to be very safe, especially where I am now. Now, it's not very safe. You live for another day. You don't know what will happen in the next day. Joburg has degenerated into another thing. I don't know how I can put it, but it's not that people come just by their choice, but the challenges they are facing from wherever they are coming from. Police, they are also failing to trace such people who are committing such crimes.
The streets are now mostly lined with informal traders, and buildings have been converted into living spaces, crudely divided up with pieces of cardboard or pieces of cloth. Now, 30 years into democracy, the city has lost its sparkle. Whereas the once grand buildings lining the streets of the city centre stood tall and proud, they now appear heavy and foreboding, and the people who walk them constantly look down or behind them, some fearing attack. That's a far cry from the heyday of Johannesburg, when men in tailor-made suits went about their business alongside women wearing big hair, gloves and pretty dresses, tottering in heels from one fashion house to the next, stopping at tea rooms to lunch with friends.
This city of Johannesburg, 30 years ago, this city was one of the most modern cities in the world. We inherited world-class country to a large extent, but at the time, this infrastructure was tailored primarily for the few white community. They enjoyed the best infrastructure in the world. Unfortunately, for some reason, for this government not to inherit this and expand it to the broader society, unfortunately, what they did, destroyed everything. They talk about building new cities. I don't understand the logic behind destroying what you've got now and thinking that you will build new cities. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. It is just political platitudes and political rhetoric and gimmicks to stay in power.
You then saw the big corporates that had offices here, including banks and many of them. They started to migrate out of the CBD, and that's how you end up with Sandton, Rosebank, Eastgate. So those places came as a result of movement out of the CBD by big corporates. And that then saw a gradual decline and crisis in the CBD of Joburg. And that's why the problem that we're sitting with, because the maintenance of the infrastructure in the CBD, oversight on what's happening.
The city of Johannesburg, indeed, it's supposed to be a world-class African city. But over the years, due to different factors, some of them, it's bad governance in successive governments, especially at local government. Secondly, it's attributed to cross-migration, semi-immigration, and so forth. And just bad management of properties. You know, some of the property owners, they've abandoned their buildings over the years. So those buildings got hijacked by organized criminal syndicates. And their modus operandi is just to extort money out of the people, neglect these buildings, and not give them a proper maintenance.
Right now, I'm just trying to push, but it's not like before. Before, the business was okay. I don't know exactly what you're supposed to do, what we can do. I don't know exactly. That is, I don't want to lie. There's no business. There's no business.
There have been several attempts to rejuvenate the city, but it will take more than a lick of paint to restore Johannesburg to its former glory.
A lot of other inner city rejuvenation projects have tried to attract people from the northern suburbs and try to create something that's not really real. It's trendy, it's cool, but cool does come and go. At the end of the day, Johannesburg as a whole was built around the inner city. A lot of people, whether they live in the east, the west, the south, they have to commute to Joburg CBD to actually go and work in Sandton and Rosebank. They don't really want to work there.
Joburg never died, Joburg changed. And the makeup on the people on the streets changed, and the shops that are on the streets changed, and the types of businesses that were in the buildings changed. And when there weren't businesses to fill those buildings, the buildings themselves changed, and Joburg became a pioneer of inner city redevelopment from office to retail conversion.
There is a massive influx of people from parts of Africa within South Africa that are coming to the city centers. So some of them, they've got good intentions, some of them, they've got no good intentions. Some of them, they don't understand what is the purpose of urbanization, whereby the city is attracting people that they don't take ownership of the streets, of their environment, and we end up facing this kind of problems within the city, whereby buildings get hijacked time and again, they get vandalized, and the environment gets polluted. So we cannot govern at the expense of the environment, at the expense of the city that is constantly decaying. You can't allow anarchy of building hijackers running the city amok. That cannot be tolerated. We need to see strong action from the government side. Law and order is being eroded. As I'm standing here, you are standing here, we could be marked at any time. Because if you look at the unemployment rate in South Africa, it's close to 50%, if I'm not mistaken. Of that percentage, if you look at the youth unemployment rate, it's probably at 68% or more because of lack of opportunities. Some of these people are just roaming around in the streets. They will mark you eventually. Some of these youth, they are educated in their own right, they've graduated, but there is lack of job opportunities. However, that should not be used as an excuse to mark people. In a nutshell, people need to take principles of Ubuntu, love their country, and take ownership of their country as well.
One of the biggest issues is law enforcement. Gary Aramband, who's in the property business, says the future success of a rejuvenated and thriving city depends on how the City Council will work with the private sector.
Issues of lawlessness are national issues. They're not specific to Joburg CBD. It is amplified in the inner city because, well, it is densely populated. Government and city administration really does need to come to the party in terms of bylaw enforcement. What we've done in our own ecosystem and in this part of the city is City Council has enabled us to supplement bylaw enforcement, security services. So we've spoken about inner city improvement districts, which effectively is a non-profit organization, voluntary created and voluntarily joined by property owners in the inner city. So what happens is similar to a body corporate is all these property owners pay a levy to this non-profit organization. And this non-profit supplements cleaning and security services where Pick It Up and JMPD is stretched. And I think that has been a very large part of the success of this part of the inner city.
The investment community is invited to partner with the City of Joburg in a historic quest to create a safer and economically dynamic inner city. The City of Johannesburg Council has released 84 properties to the private sector as part of a quest to turn the inner city into a construction site and grow the economy by at least 5%. For more information, visit jhbproperty.co.za. Together, let us create a cleaner and safer inner city in which residents and business make a decent living. #Building New Jersey.
The improvement district has private security and private cleaning ready to give residents and office workers and residential people who live here, give them an opportunity to enjoy clean and safe streets. And I think that has been important.
how to bring in investors, firstly those of the state, even at national government level, to help the resources of the city. Our buildings are here. Some of them are not so much in good conditions. We're going to have to reinvest in the buildings. Many of them, by the way, left here when corporates left. The government had to take over these buildings because there would have been a social disaster in the CBD. So many of the buildings we are sitting on as government offices were acquired when corporates left to save the face of the city.
If we had a strong bylaw enforcement from the relevant authorities, if they were working in tandem and they were monitoring and implementing proper policies and a proper stringent regulation framework to ensure that bylaws are properly enforced and there is proper environmental management and proper public health management as well. You know, when people are pulling into different directions, the whole system collapses. If the city embarks on public awareness programs, not a hit and run, long term, so that they can educate the people and or the citizens about environmental management and taking care of open spaces and the buildings, and give them probably just a workshop to manage these buildings and do a proper maintenance, because some of them are truly neglected. Where we are on Risk Street. If you look at this old post office, it is under public works. It was neglected. Vagrants took charge of it. They illegally occupied it. They vandalized it to the T. And this is part of our heritage at the end of the day. So if the public, the private, and the community can come together, have a sense of ownership and pride in their city, none of this will be happening.
The youth, however, are not buying into the revival of Johannesburg, seeing the city rather as a tourist site, a place to visit, but not a place to invest in or live in.
Expectations from where I'm coming from, they have like big expectations of Joburg because it's Jozi. I'm going to Jozi. Why are you going to Jozi? Because I'm looking for money. You get here, you have like the highest unemployment here. So maybe the expectations from home, we know that this is a city of gold. We know we're here to make money. You get in here, the buildings are collapsing. I personally feel like the population is getting higher and higher and higher. The city of opportunities for South African, but I can see that in the years that I came in here, it was a beautiful place.
We're going to make this place safe. I can tell you, rental here for corporates is going to be cheaper. There's going to be lighting, and we also want to make sure that commercial entities come back. There's more commercial activities, restaurants, hospitality. There are big things that are coming.